Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves are world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond. Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. As always, I'm Grant McAuley. It's been a hot minute, but we've got some things going on across the hot stove in Major League Baseball. The winter meetings have come and gone. The Braves have got some activity brewing as well, with the meetings in the rear view, just barely so, on a Wednesday night. So we got some stuff to talk about there. And overall, just a great opportunity to collect the baseball world all in one place. And we've got a lot that we're going to be talking about when it comes to the baseball world, the Atlanta Braves, the National League East. All kinds of different things are on deck here on this edition of From the Diamond. Before we get started, I want to remind you, as always, you can subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcasts. If you've done that, I appreciate it. If you would be nice enough to leave a rating and a review, that would help out the show immensely. Of course, the likes and shares on social media are also appreciated. You can find me at Grant McAuley on most platforms. And if you're looking for a great place with links to everything I've got going on, FromTheDiamond.com, right there on the top navigational bar, that will catch you up with all of it. Well, let's lead off with the winter meetings, because that, of course, was the focus of the entire Major League Baseball world. I was down in Lake Buena Vista on the Disney property from Monday through Wednesday with the opportunity to catch up with a lot of folks, have a lot of good baseball discussions, and also watch the signings and the big acquisitions starting to happen, and continue to monitor and get an idea of what the Atlanta Braves are going to be looking to do by having some of those aforementioned discussions. One of the guys I got to talk to was Walt Weiss, the new manager of the Atlanta Braves. You're going to hear my one-on-one interview with him a little bit later on, but it was fun to see him away from that introductory press conference, which of course was a big moment, but getting a chance to settle in to the job, to answer some questions about the team a little bit more, and of course look forward to what's to come for the Atlanta Braves in 2026, and to see who exactly is going to be joining this squad to help get them back to where they want to be, which is competing, not just in the National League East, but to make a run in the playoffs again. That remains the Atlanta Braves' goal. But I do, of course, have to skip to the end so that we can talk about what the Braves were busiest doing, and that was signing outfielder Mike Yastrzemski to a 2-year, $23 million contract, adding an outfielder to their mix, and something I think that they were really looking for, a little bit of extra power and more pieces to be able to mix and match as you need to, and again, protect yourself against the injuries that really added up for the Atlanta outfield in 2025. Yastrzemski is set to make $9 million in 2026, $10 million in 2027. He has a $7 million option for the 2028 season with a $4 million buyout. So if you add it all up, that is $23 million over the next couple of years, guaranteed. Yastrzemski is 35 years old. He played in 146 games last year between the Giants and the Royals. He hit just .233, but on-based .333, which means he knows how to draw some walks. He's also got some power, and it's been about a 2 to 3 win player with the San Francisco Giants before he was a trade deadline acquisition by the Royals. So let's talk a little bit about how Mike Yastrzemski can fit into the Braves' outfield and DH plans. With the ability to play all three of those positions, you have now got a very capable backup, whether he's starting in right field and Ronald Acuña Jr. DHs, whether you give him some starts in left field and you put Jurickson Profar in the DH spot. The bottom line is you just signed a very useful player who can help you out in a number of different ways. Per season, just according to Baseball Reference, 2.4 WAR, 120 games, 62 runs scored, 23 doubles, 18 homers, 52 runs knocked in, 47 walks, 109 strikeouts. That's a .324 on base, .447 slug, so a .772 OPS, which comes out to a better than league average hitter and somebody that gives you defense in all three spots. Again, this just checks an awful lot of boxes, and with their DH spot free to move some pieces around, this seemed to be the kind of move that the Braves were in the market for this winter, and Yastrzemski is their guy. it just gives the Braves more to work with. And I think that's one of the big things that they were sorely lacking in 2025. And injury, of course, played a big part of this, was having good options and fallback plans when something did go wrong on the health front. This is a nice piece for the Braves, but far from the last piece that they need. And we're going to talk a lot more about those as we go along here. But there have been some very interesting dominoes falling all around the National League East. And I bring that up because Edwin Diaz, the all-star closer of the New York Mets, is now a Los Angeles Dodger, signing a 3-year, $69 million contract. Meanwhile, Pete Alonso, the all-star first baseman of the Mets, he agreed to a 5-year, $155 million contract with the Baltimore Orioles on Wednesday. So two big Mets, two big pieces of what the New York Mets had built are now wearing different uniforms. I know they signed Devin Williams. I know that they were kind of hot and cold on Pete Alonso over the last couple of years. And I'm not necessarily sure what all the ins and outs of that were, but I just kind of felt like eventually cooler heads would prevail and the Mets and Alonso would continue this relationship. But clearly, the Orioles were able to swoop in and get a 40-plus homer hitter to put in a lineup that needed some right-handed power. I think it's a really good fit for them, and I don't think the Braves or Braves fans are going to be too upset to not have to deal with Alonso when you look at the New York Mets lineup moving forward, because it's going to be difficult to find that kind of just raw power and run production to put in the middle of the Mets order. And, honestly, it's their problem to figure out, but it could be a net positive for the Atlanta Braves and the rest of the National League East. Now, you're not going to be as lucky when it comes to the Philadelphia Phillies, who have their own big free agents out there, none bigger than Kyle Schwarber, the National League home run leader from a season ago. He has returned to the Philadelphia Phillies on a long-term contract. He got paid big for a guy who you might argue is without position, and his best position is DH, but when it comes to hitting, few sluggers were able to do it better than Kyle Schwarber in 2025, and he has really, really made Philadelphia a home. 5 years, $150 million is going to keep Schwarber in Philadelphia for the foreseeable future. That was a move I think they very much needed to make, as the Phillies have been on the brink of good things and also on the brink of wondering if maybe it's time to start rethinking things, and perhaps it will be, but they decided to pony up, pay the money, and continue to try to win with the group that they have, although there's still a couple of other notable Philly free agents out there as of Wednesday night. That would be catcher JT Realmuto, the veteran, and lefty Ranger Suarez, who may draw some interest from a number of different clubs across baseball for his ability to help front a rotation. And some other news and notes from the winter meetings, of course. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we did see the MLB draft lottery take place on Tuesday night. The Braves came in with a pretty low percentage when it came to getting the number one overall pick. I believe it was 4.5% was their chances of doing that. And instead of moving up, they actually moved back, getting the number 9 overall pick in the draft. It's the first time the Braves have had a top 10 pick since 2019 when they drafted catcher Shea Langoliers, who ultimately was traded to the Oakland Athletics in the Matt Olson trade. But a top 10 pick is what you expected after the Braves had the season they did last year. You would have liked to have moved up a couple of spots rather than move back a couple of spots, quite obviously. But there will be a lot of talent available as you draft inside the top 10, and the Braves will look to make the most of that. And keep in mind, pending what happens with free agency, the Braves also got a draft pick courtesy of Drake Baldwin winning the National League Rookie of the Year. So they have a little bit of extra capital. Perhaps they will end up using that. Perhaps they will end up having to sacrifice some of that to sign a key free agent. We'll see how all of that plays out. Those are the current pieces that are still out there on the board and at least are available as assets to the Braves right now. So let's jump into some of the meat and potatoes from the conversations I was able to have at the winter meetings. Of course, all 30 clubs are there. All 30 clubs officials are there. All 30 clubs managers are there. So I got to listen to some of the comments from the other managers and general managers, as it were. But the opportunity to catch up with Walt Weiss in his official capacity for this first time. I mean, I know that the introductory press conference is nice, but I can tell you this. Just from my conversations with Walt Weiss and getting to see him interface with a lot of other people there, this is a gentleman that I think that Braves fans may have a little bit more fun getting to know than thinking that they already know him, if that makes sense. This is not a carbon copy of Brian Snitker, even though he was on the staff, and even though you might not have heard as much from Walt Weiss, and even though you might have been familiar with Walt Weiss in Colorado, I would say a few things before we hear from the Braves manager. Number one, the Atlanta managerial job is not Colorado. You're going to have a very different set of circumstances, a very different set of expectations, Everything, to make a long story short, is going to be different. It's also not going to be Walt Weiss's first rodeo, so to speak. He can take some of the experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between that he learned in Colorado and apply that to this job, and take the last 8 years worth of experience that he had being part of a staff on a perennial winner, a World Series champion, all of those things. Take what he's learned and absorbed from being on Brian Snitker's staff and redirect all of that knowledge and all of the familiarity he has with this club into the kind of continuity that I think the Braves are expecting as he takes the reins in 2026 to lead this team. They're hoping right back to play October baseball the way that they were prior to 2025. So let me go ahead and play you my conversation with Braves manager Walt Weiss. It'll lay a good foundation for some of the things that were talked about at the winter meetings. And when we get done with that, I'll play you a few different comments that he had about his coaching staff, how it all came together, the batting order, and where Ronald Acuña Jr. might fit in that, and some of the things that he learned from managing the Rockies that could benefit him as he takes over with the Braves. But before we get to all of that, this was my conversation with Braves manager Walt Weiss from the winter meetings.
Here with Braves manager Walt Weiss at the winter meetings. This is kind of a nice little checkpoint for all of Major League Baseball. For yourself, I would imagine this is one of those boxes you wanted to check on the way to spring training, which is right around the corner. How are you feeling as you've gotten these first few weeks on the job? And, what's your, overall view of what the Braves have been able to do so far this winter and maybe what's ahead?
Yeah, I think always excited about what's ahead because, Alex, he's relentless in his pursuit of improving the roster. So anything can happen at any time. But I feel good about our club. The pitching health, the reports we're getting with our starters has all been positive. And, of course, they got to go out and do it and put together a workload and, stay healthy. And look, every team is thinking about that, and keeping their fingers crossed. So the reports there have been really good. I like our club, and I know our club really well. I think that helps, to come in and just hit the ground running in spring training. And so, yeah, I'm feeling good about things right now.
Yeah, a lot to feel good about. And obviously, as you mentioned, familiar with a lot of the guys that are going to be on this club. I did want to start with the pitching because if you look at it on paper, which the game is not played on, as you know, there's some very good names in the starting rotation, but health was the big question last year. There have been some good reports on Spencer Schwellenbach, on Grant Holmes. Obviously, Ronaldo Lopez could be a big factor in that. We also saw Hurston Waldrop step up and into it, not to mention Chris Sale and Spencer Strider. So, again, this is a very, very good group. So as you head towards spring training, I guess health is the one thing that you want to see, and it could give you some options and some competition, which is always great as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And like I said, everybody's keeping their fingers crossed about as it relates to their pitching health. We've had some recent history here with some injuries, obviously, so even more urgency there. But like you said, on paper, it's great. We got to go out and do it. But a very talented group of starting pitchers. In a perfect world, which never happens in this game, we're really good on the mound. But like I said, they got to build up a workload and see how they respond and that type of thing. But as we sit here today, everything is very positive.
I talked to Alex Anthopoulos, I guess, probably a few weeks ago, maybe about a month or so ago, and I don't think the message has changed. When it comes to relievers in the bullpen, you've got Raisel Iglesias back in place, but he said we're looking for, quote, lots of pitchers in the offseason to get that bullpen fortified. There were a couple of different team option decisions that gave the Braves maybe some more flexibility there. How do you size up the bullpen, and what do you think that you might need to kind of have that group where you want to have it as you head to North Fort?
Yeah, I think that's an area of emphasis right now, and I think, like you said, Alex did say that. So the old adage, you never have enough pitching.
Yeah.
And your pitching depth is always going to get tested at the major league level over the course of a major league season. So you want to collect arms, and stockpile them. And so I know that that's an emphasis for Alex, and I'm sure he's checking in on everything that's out there. So I'm assuming we'll have some new arms here as closer we get to spring training.
Yeah, some more of that competition we talk about for those spots to shore up that bullpen. And we got a chance to speak to you a little bit earlier as the full media contingent and talk a little bit about the lineup and some of the possibilities that are there. And also, as you just mentioned, a lot of these names. A lot of the guys who are going to be in place. Some of them had some very good years last year. Some of them dealt with injuries. Some of them had some off years. Some of them had to deal with a little bit of all three of those things. But the DH spot is one that is still kind of open for discussion for the Braves right now. You mentioned that there's a lot of advantages to maybe being able to rotate some guys through that spot and give your lineup some continuity that you'd like to have and some more at-bats to go around.
Yeah, I do really like the thought of that. Getting Ronald off his legs, give him a day of DH here and there, keeping Baldwin's bat in the lineup. Go around the horn. You have flexibility to give guys what I refer to as a half a day off. that's something, we play for 7 or 8 months. And so those are things we got to think about, but it's nice to have the freedom and the flexibility to do that if that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know what Matt Olson would do with a half a day off, but at least you could entertain the idea of it because he doesn't take very many days off.
No, he doesn't. He's rock solid. He's a stud, man. Matt Olson's a stud. He's one of those guys you got to drag off the field. That game's played streak will tell you.
Yeah, let me ask you about a couple of guys on that infield that dealt with injury last year. Ozzie Albies, it seems like annually has to deal with a lot of different things. You've known him for a while. There's not a harder worker and a better grinder than him, but he has dealt with a lot of injuries. And Austin Riley, it seemed like just as he's gotten going the last 2 years, he's dealt with an injury that's taken him off of the field. Have you been able to converse and get some updates with those guys, and what do you anticipate for them for spring?
Talk to those guys. Everything's great right now, and Austin feels great. Ozzie's in a great place. But you're right. The fact of the matter is, there's some injury history there that's bouncing a little bit on some of our guys. So even more enticing to have that spot to move some of the pieces around. And look, that's not a cure-all. I know that. But it's nice to have the opportunity to do that. And if you see a guy is dragging a little bit, but you don't want to take him out of the lineup. So, but yeah, all those guys, they do everything they can to stay healthy. They take care of their bodies. They live right. They eat right. Some of those things you just can't control, but it's not like they're not trying to stay healthy and stay out there, for an entire season.
Yeah, and would you be able to throw Sean Murphy kind of in that same boat in terms of just trending in the right direction heading towards spring?
Yes, absolutely. All reports on Sean been good. With that surgery, it's typical that you wait till about 4 months out before you really get a good read on things, but so far, everything's been great. He's progressing, and he's on track and all those things. So, but yeah, I think we'll have a better idea in a month, maybe, I guess it would be, So, well, yeah, everything's good with Murph right now.
Well, we've talked a little bit about pitching. We've talked a little bit about hitting. We've talked a little bit about the winter as well. But I know you are looking forward to that trip down to Northport to get spring training, get everything started. You've got a brand new coaching staff. I know you're excited about very many of those guys and what they bring to the fold. Overall, I guess the excitement level is probably trending towards a 10 for you as we head towards the middle of February.
Yeah, look, I mean, I understand the challenges of this job, and that's what I signed up for, right? And so I understand that, but I am very excited about our staff, our club, and what's ahead.
Well, we're all excited to get baseball back in our lives as 2026 rolls around. Happy holidays to you, a happy new year, and before you know it, time to play ball. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Grant. Appreciate it.
So as you heard, some good updates on the health of the starting rotation. As Walt said, they've got to take on that workload again and get built up, but in spring training, expect to see Reynaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes both stretched out as starters. But those two, along with Spencer Schwellenbach, are all trending in the right direction. I think you're going to see a healthy Spencer Strider who got a full, normal offseason to get himself back to where he expects to be. You throw in Chris Sale, you throw in the talented rookie Hurston Waldrop, and the Braves do have, at least on paper, as I mentioned, some very good names for their rotation, but I don't necessarily think that will stop them from going out and shopping for some more starting pitching. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But let's hear some of Walt Weiss's comments about the coaching staff. I know this was one of the things that Braves fans seemed to get excited about in waves as different names came out. In particular, the departure of Rick Kranitz in favor of Jeremy Hefner was one of the major storylines to building the Braves' 2026 coaching staff. Hefner comes over from the Mets, where he worked with a number of arms that found success. Let's hear what Walt Weiss has to say about Atlanta's new pitching coach.
He's a sharp guy, man. Well, I think the sweet spot in this game, we're in the age of information and analytics and technology. The sweet spot is the guy or the guys that have feel, that have done it and understand the tech, understand the info, know how to use it. And Hefner's the poster child for that. Really good feel. Pitched in the big leagues. He's worked his way to the top. I mean, he's been in one of the biggest markets. Dealt with Hall of Famers, some pretty big personalities, and everybody raves about him. The thing that makes me feel good as a manager is, like, every time we announced one of those coaching hires, my phone blew up from people that knew him, saying, "Wow, you guys are putting together an unbelievable staff." So that's very reassuring.
Ronald Acuña Jr. is in Venezuela playing some winter ball. He got off to a very fast start with 6 stolen bases in the first 3 games. Obviously, Acuña and the Braves are looking forward to a healthy season, and this is a guy who is working incredibly hard. If you do not follow Ronald Acuña Jr. on Instagram and you're not seeing the stories of the workouts and the effort that he is putting into having himself built up to be ready for 2026, I would go ahead and encourage you to do that. And if you're not familiar with how much he loves the game of baseball and going home to play it, well, that should answer your question about why in the world Ronald Acuña Jr. is playing winter ball. But the Braves have supported that, and I'm sure they're already having some discussions about the World Baseball Classic as Ronald Acuña Jr. feels like a shoo-in to join Team Venezuela when the WBC happens this coming spring. Now, my question to Walt Weiss was, hey, we've seen Ronald Acuña Jr. at the top of the Braves order for a very long time. Is that still the spot for him, or are the Braves really rethinking where exactly their superstar right fielder hits in the Atlanta order? Let's take a listen to our exchange about that. I know you haven't necessarily gotten to the point where you're making out lineup cards yet, but I know he hit down a little bit in the order. Do you anticipate him moving back into
that's a good conversation. I'm looking forward to that one with him. I want to pick his brain a little bit on that. It's enticing to have him at the top of the order. I really like when a lineup turns over that there's teeth right away. The pitcher got to run through a gauntlet, as soon as that lineup turns over. So there's some incentive. He was prolific in that position. The other argument is, you put him in a more RBI position in the lineup, and hit him third. Those are conversations we're going to have. We're going to talk about. Like you said, we're a ways away from lineup, talking about lineups and that type of thing, but it's on my radar.
One other thing I thought was really interesting from Walt Weiss's overall media availability was just describing the difference in where he was as a manager, a young manager taking over in Colorado for those few years, as to where he is now after a break from managing, but a new opportunity, and at the age of 60, having more experience under his belt and knowing a little bit more about the job this time around. Not to mention having a lot more pieces in place here in Atlanta than he ever had at any point in Colorado. Here's how Walt Weiss described the differences and the things he learned from his first time around as a manager that he's hoping to benefit from this time around with Atlanta.
I talked about this in my press conference, that the circumstances couldn't be more different from the first time I did this. In Colorado, when I got hired, I'd been out of the game for 4 years. I was coaching high school football. I was out of baseball. Took the interview just to experience it, to experience doing it. I had never done that. And I ended up getting a job. And here I am, I'm like, oh, now what? But a lot of on-the-job training. And I had a good staff in Colorado that helped me along the way. It's early on. And the team was coming off, at that point, was the worst season in franchise history in 2012. They've had a couple of tough ones lately, but at that point, it was the worst. And so it was very different. And so I didn't even know what was important to me as a manager the first time around because I hadn't done it. So very different now. 8 years as a bench coach with a team that is built to win now. I know the team like the back of my hand. I walked into that first situation in Colorado completely blind. I wasn't even in the game, let alone know our team. So just completely different, but a lot of lessons learned along the way. And I'm grateful for that opportunity because I wouldn't be sitting here today without that. The record wasn't great back then, obviously, but I'm proud of some of the things we accomplished in those 4 years, culturally especially. So, yeah, a lot of great lessons learned. And did I think I'd get another chance? I didn't know. And I didn't have to. I didn't have to do this again. I loved being Snit's bench coach. I loved being back in the Braves uniform. It's fairly well documented. I turned down some interviews, over the last several years because it was going to have to be really good to pull me away from what I was doing. And I truly didn't know if I would ever manage. And like I said, it was okay if I didn't manage again. I was perfectly fine with that. Now, once Snit stepped away and Alice asked if I was interested, I got pretty excited about it.
So I really enjoyed having some conversations with Walt Weiss and having the opportunity to hear him put this job in perspective and in his own words, because it is going to be different. I don't think there's any two ways about that. A lot of people might have just thought because Walt was already in place and they expected somebody from outside the organization to come in and be the manager, that you're just going to get more of the same. I don't think more of the same for Walt Weiss is necessarily a bad thing. And what do I mean by that? I think he brings a certain amount of continuity and some familiarity to the Braves clubhouse, but with his experience in this game, with what he has learned between his first managerial stint and this one, plus a revamped coaching staff, I really feel like the Braves have built a really intriguing dynamic with their coaching staff, one that might have had a lot of people wondering what would change when it was Walt Weiss who took over for Brian Snitker, to one that I think is going to get the opportunity to know him in a very different way and allow him to show you his own personality and his own style, and as he said, his own touch to managing. Because while he has learned from Brian Snitker, from Bobby Cox, from Tony La Russa, from a slew of other great baseball people over the course of his career, he's quick to say, I appreciate all of that knowledge, but to do this job right, it's going to have to be my message and my voice and my touch. And I think he's going to bring all of those things to the Braves in 2026 and beyond. Now, on the final day of the winter meetings, we have a breakfast with the managers. So the beat writers and the media who are there covering those teams will have a chance to just kind of sit down and talk baseball. No microphones, no notepads, no cameras rolling, just a chance to talk about the game, tell some stories, and just fellowship a little bit, which, by the way, is one of my favorite parts of the job. Sure, the interviewing, the reporting, the writing, the podcasting, the broadcasting, all of the things that go with it, yeah, all of that stuff is fine, and I do enjoy it, but just getting a chance to sit down and talk about the game with other baseball people is an awful lot of fun. And I know it's not a realistic possibility, but if Braves fans and folks who are on the fence about the Walt Weiss hire really got a chance to just sit down and get to know this guy, I think they would come away impressed with what this guy knows about the game, the experiences that he's had, the stories that he can tell, and how much more he still has to give, and why this opportunity to manage the Braves is something that he is fired up and excited about, and I think in turn has the team fired up and excited about having Walt and this coaching staff in place as they look to get things back on track. Long story short, I think the Braves got their guy. They wanted some continuity, but they wanted somebody they could trust to help lead them right back to where they've been and fulfill those expectations of getting back into October with someone who's been along for the ride quite a while and is now going to get a chance to take the wheel and steer this ship to what they hope will be those October waters once again. Now, as I mentioned, and as I'm sure you've seen and read, the winter meetings are a collection of all of baseball, which means whether it's media, whether it's team officials, players, baseball people of all types showed up in Orlando, and one of the biggest names every single year is super agent Scott Boras, who had his normal, what I'll call it, rock concert with dozens and dozens of people surrounding him to get a little bit of insight on Boras's clients, where they might be going and what he sees, the state of baseball, the state of free agency, and what have you, just those thoughts in general. Now, I didn't buy a ticket to the concert, but Boras does have at least one client that Braves fans are going to be interested in seeing where exactly he lands, and that's shortstop Ha-Seong Kim, who came over from the Tampa Bay Rays and played September with the Braves, declined his player option to go back out onto the free agent market because this time around, he's not coming off major shoulder surgery. Now, I think Kim played pretty well and showed teams that he was healthy down the stretch in September. But if you look at the numbers overall, you do kind of wonder, is he going to really find a bigger and better deal annually than $16 million? The answer to that might be no. But can he get multiple years? I think that was more so the question and worth taking the gamble on rather than picking up the player option. So that is not altogether surprising that Kim wanted to bet on himself and go back out and decline that option so that Scott Boras could go back to work and try to find him a multi-year deal. So I got a chance to ask Scott Boras how he thinks Kim will fare on the free agent market this time around.
Well, I mean, he's in great health, and I think he showed that in his time in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I think everybody wants to come into this market and get a two-way shortstop. It gives you offense and defense. And, I mean, other than Ha-Seong, there is no other shortstop that I know that really have that talent, those qualities to give you anywhere from a 3 to 5 WAR season. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that's of that ilk. It's kind of a funny time in baseball because I remember a few years ago when I had Seager and Simeon and a whole group of shortstops. Yeah, there were like 5 of them, Correa's market. But this year, I made the quip today that other than Ha-Seong, it's Kim possible to find another shortstop. That you're the first to have that, by the way.
I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that.
But I think that a number of clubs have reached out to, sign him.
And he does have that versatility where he is a shortstop, but he can move around to a couple of different spots and go to fit.
Too. He's so good defensively. He can play second, third,
So there you have some insights from Scott Boras on Ha-Seong Kim's trip out onto the market. Obviously, being healthy is one of the big boxes you have to be able to check, but he does bring up an interesting point. There are not a ton of shortstops that are both good defensively and offensively. Kim, I think, does check both of those boxes. He's not the most dynamic player on either side, but he also has some versatility. So if you did want him to play some other positions, he could be available to do that for you as well. So I do think he'll be in demand. Will he get a long-term deal that's 4, 5, 6 years? I'm not sold on that. But could he get another multi-year deal, maybe 2 in an option or 3 guaranteed? I think that's certainly possible. But there are some other dominoes to fall, both in the trade market and the free agent market, before perhaps Ha-Seong Kim is able to have his choice. But I will say, I still think he fits into what the Braves are doing, even with Mauricio Dubon already on board, which the Braves obviously are happy to have his versatility. I did talk to some people around baseball who weren't convinced that Dubon was going to be the everyday guy. Now, could he end up being that by process of elimination and not being able to find another shortstop? Yes, and I think that there are a lot of people that are already concerned that that is going to be the sole outcome, but I do not think that the Braves have called off their search for a shortstop in the second week of December with 2 full months to go before spring training and a lot of free agents, including Ha-Seong Kim, still out there, plus the opportunity to perhaps make another trade that could fill that void for Atlanta. We'll just have to see what Alex Anthopoulos is able to make happen over the next couple of months. There is still time to go this winter. It may not feel like it when some of the big names are signing somewhere else, but the Braves, I think, are trying to take that measured approach to filling their needs. I think shortstop is still on that shopping list. I think a starting pitcher is on that shopping list, and I definitely think bullpen arms are on that shopping list as well. With that said, I think one of the more fascinating storylines and rumors to come out of the first couple of days of the winter meetings was Edwin Diaz making the decision to leave the Mets and join the Dodgers. Now, is that a difficult decision to figure out? No, it's not. You have a place where maybe you were familiar and maybe the offer was close, or you can go to a club that can do a serious amount of winning and has proven that over the last couple of years with World Series titles and is serious about paying some money to relievers to help them out, and Diaz is going to get 3 years and $69 million to close for the Dodgers moving forward. Now, in the aftermath of that signing with LA, Atlanta was revealed as one of the clubs that was pursuing Edwin Diaz. Well, if there is an area that Alex Anthopoulos has shown that he is not shy about putting some money into, I would say that it's the bullpen. The latest example, $16 million for Raisel Iglesias, who could definitely close for the Braves next year, and I think they would be comfortable with that. But if they have a chance to go out and get another proven closer and make a splash with that move, and then have Iglesias available for the late innings, and then perhaps find another late inning reliever, all of a sudden you've got quantity and quality at the back end of the bullpen. Now, if we play a little bit of connect the dots, if the Braves are interested in Edwin Diaz, why wouldn't they be interested in Robert Suarez, another all-star closer, he of the San Diego Padres, a free agent who will be in line for a multi-year deal? Whether or not he gets as much as Edwin Diaz, that remains to be seen. But if the Braves want to get aggressive and sign a guy like Suarez and spend some money to create one of the best bullpens in the National League, that would go a long way towards accomplishing that goal. So I do think that Suarez is a realistic target for the Atlanta Braves. If they are truly in the market for a big-name reliever and a guy that could help level up their bullpen, signing a 2-time All-Star that led the National League in saves last year and has a big-time arm, that would be just the kind of move you want to make to turn that bullpen dream into a reality. Now, as I said earlier, I still think the Braves are in the market for a starting pitcher. Even though they have some really good names on paper, we saw what can happen to a rotation over the course of a season when everything seemingly goes wrong. You didn't have Spencer Strider to start, but the 5 men who were in the opening day rotation for the Braves last year all ended up on the 60-day injured list. Chris Sale was able to come back. Grant Holmes, Reynaldo Lopez, and Spencer Schwellenbach have all been able to advance in rehabbing their injuries and appear to be lined up to start spring training healthy and begin building up to start next season. Now, I think you could look at Grant Holmes and Reynaldo Lopez as wild cards in this whole equation. And what do I mean by that? Well, obviously, they had some success in the starting rotation, but they have also had success in the bullpen. So if you do go out and get that proven starter who can cover 30 starts and 170 innings or so, and you decide that you want to move one or both of them back into the bullpen to help you out there where they've each had success, that could ultimately benefit the Braves. Then you have to factor in where Hurston Waldrop fits in all of this, because he was 6-1 with a sub-3 ERA in 10 outings last year and really showed that there's not much else he has to prove. You just need to give him the innings and the opportunity. He threw well over 150, I believe 160 innings last year, so it's not a question of being able to cover the workload, but if you believe that you've got Chris Sale, Spencer Strider, and Spencer Schwellenbach in place, and you look at Hurston Waldrop favorably for at least the fifth starter spot, if you find a fourth starter that really answers that question, whether that's trade or free agency, being able to move Reynaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes into the bullpen is something that I think could ultimately benefit the club. Now, looking into spring training, they might still stretch out as starters and then just move to the bullpen. You can have guys get work in a variety of different ways. They can throw in the exhibition games. They can throw sim games. They can face minor leaguers on the backfields as well. So you can find the innings for all these guys. You're just going to have to make a decision how you can best deploy them to help your team be the most well-rounded and have the best depth and the best quality of that depth in both rotation and bullpen to get through the grind that is a 162-game regular season for the opportunity to throw even more innings when you get to October, and goodness knows you'd like to see that group be healthy. A couple of other names to keep in mind, of course, Bryce Elder and Joey Wentz. They're each out of options. If you're drawing this up in the most ideal scenario, I don't think either one of those guys are realistically arms that you're going to put into the rotation. Not over the other names that we've already talked about, but every single year repeats the same lesson for team after team after team, and that is you've got to have depth that you can count on to get through the long marathon of the regular season. Bryce Elder and Joey Wentz both helped out the Braves last year. We'll see where they fit into Atlanta's plans in 2026. With that said, I think we've covered an awful lot here on this edition of From the Diamond. You heard a lot from Braves manager Walt Weiss. You heard a little bit from super agent Scott Boras, giving us an update on Ha-Seong Kim and his free agency. And, of course, the Braves with a new outfielder in Mike Yastrzemski, who signed a 2-year, $23 million contract with Atlanta on Wednesday night as the winter meetings came to a close. Coming up on the next From the Diamond, we will hear from the new Braves outfielder Mike Yastrzemski, his thoughts on his new team, and we'll continue to monitor the hot stove as the Braves look to put the pieces in place for 2026. My thanks again to Braves manager Walt Weiss for all the time he gave me over the course of the week, and my thanks to each and every one of you for making From the Diamond part of your baseball podcast regimen. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you'd be so kind, please leave a rating and a review, and I appreciate all the likes and shares on social media as well. You can follow along with me at Grant McAuley on most platforms, and if you need links to any and all of the stuff I have going on, FromTheDiamond.com, right there on the top navigational bar. That will get you set up with all of those. That's going to do it for this edition of From the Diamond. Until next time, I'm Grant McAuley. So long, everyone.